Hello everyone. I wonder, have you got a favourite book or a favourite film or a television drama maybe? Maybe you grew up with radio, with all those marvellous short afternoon plays. Then again, what about audible books? Do you find yourself listening to Poirot over and over again while you're doing something else? Or maybe like me, you remember back to the early days of audio versions of books, cassette tapes. I remember when you could buy a book tape at a motorway service station and then change it for a different one further up the road once you'd listened to it. Do you remember that? The way we discover stories, the way we hear stories, the way we listen to stories has changed, yes. But I'm sure we all do love a good story, whether on the television or in a book. Because another of my memories is the time from my childhood when my mother would be seen curled up with a book reading, or flicking through one of the many magazines she had, reading the stories. Then again, if you think about it, people have been predicting the end of paper books and magazines, well, basically since I was at school, often due to advances in technology. But stories still exist, books still exist, they still flourish, and newspapers occasionally still serialise books, just as they did in Charles Dickens' day. And maybe, though, you don't automatically associate Bible stories with those enjoyable leisure books. But many Bible stories, they're finely constructed. They are stories, but they're stories that explain the truth of the good news. And this week's reading is one of those examples. This week, Jesus meets a man who has been blind since his birth. He sees again. And John constructs a story that lets us see something of how God works and gives us pointers to living with some of the issues that we still deal with today in our lives. The story is a series of smoothly connected scenes, and as with all good stories, we watch the characters learn and develop through it. John shows how different people use questions skillfully to move the story on and get us today thinking about God and life. There's a marvellous dialogue in the middle that unveils the idea of a man who comes to see, and what he comes to see is that people around him are the ones who are actually blind to the truth. It is overall a great story, a story that raises some huge questions for us to think about during Lent. It's in chapter 9 of John's Gospel if you want to look it up. And at times I think we can find sympathy with all the characters in the story. We can share especially the feelings of the blind man who gains sight. And within that story, where so many people seem to pull him this way and that, he rather marvellously discovers faith. In this story, there are interfering neighbours accusing Pharisees who seem to know all the answers, parents who are worried about the consequences of the truth, whatever it is. So go on. Give the story a read. John chapter 9. This is a story that, as it unfolds, gets us thinking about just what that scary word sin means, especially at the start and the finish of the reading. The disciples ask, who sinned, the man or his parents? And the Pharisees have an answer for that question, as does Jesus. But they're different answers. What's yours? How does it shape up? While the authorities believe that Jesus is the sinner at the end, they, the Pharisees, are shown to be very quick to judge and to have judged falsely. It is the authorities in the story who are actually living in darkness, yet they claim to know what's right. It makes you think about how life and friendship works, doesn't it? Who do we believe, and why do we believe them? Why are we friends with some people? Jesus says, I came into this world for judgment so that those who do not see may see and those who do not see may become blind. Now that's a strange kind of summary of the gospel from Jesus, the one who preaches love and friendship, isn't it? It's a strange summary from Jesus, and we're going to look at that on Sunday during our live worship on Facebook and YouTube. But this is a story about people who know things, and it is a story of how they use the things they think they know to help or to hinder God. As you live with each of the people in the story, you see them grow in their knowledge of who Jesus is, especially the blind man. First, the blind man sees Jesus as a prophet, then a man sent from God, and when Jesus finally shows who he is, What happens is that the man comes to faith and worships Jesus. As I said before, it is some story, isn't it? Especially since for much of it the people do grow in knowledge. But they grow in knowledge even though Jesus is physically absent from the story. Is that helping us today in some way as we work out how to grow our knowledge of how Jesus works in our lives? We can't physically see him, yet we do feel his presence, and we know his expectations, and we can develop our knowledge too. Jesus is physically absent from the story once the blind man goes to the pool of Siloam. He doesn't reappear until the man is rejected by the synagogue. But while Jesus is away, the main discussion is around the way people respond to Jesus. Who responds with honesty and increasing knowledge? Who with curiosity and who with fear? What about those who are angry and issue threats? Because all those emotions are there in one short story. Can you think of times like that in the life of the world at the moment, where people react in these ways when confronted with the truth? Probably. But look closely at the story and you'll see that while the blind man is miraculously healed, he doesn't really understand what has happened or who Jesus is. He doesn't understand until Jesus himself reveals the answer. Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, the Son of Man, and the one speaking to you," he means himself, "is he, the Son of Man." And what are we told that the man does when he hears these words? He believes, he worships Jesus. And Lent is a good time to go back through the story of our lives and work out how our knowledge of God, Jesus and the Holy Spirit has changed and grown over the years. But as we think back, remember that we can only get so far by ourselves. Understanding requires remembering Jesus' words each day, even though he is not physically with us. Jesus is in the transformation business. So what transforming words is he saying to you today? How is he challenging you during this lockdown Lent? How is he challenging you? So remember, our online worship is live on Facebook and YouTube at 10:30 on Sunday. And as always, we've got a number of musicians with us this week who've produced music to enhance our worship. And Sarah will be with us too to provide some explanation of the Bible reading. And Sarah, remember, is also available each week to chat with during the service on Facebook from 10:15 or thereabouts. The service starts at 10:30. If you want to look up the reading before Sunday, we will be looking at John chapter 9. You can find that online in Bible Gateway, or there will be a version read to you on Facebook. Looking forward to worshipping with you this Sunday. See you then.